this week's Parshas VaYishlach, we find the Isser, the lav of Gid Hanasheh. I would have liked to speak on the daf. I was speaking to Meshulam to try to find something, but Ma'aseh Markava, like the Gemara says, you're not Irish Barabim. So once again, we'll speak on the Parsha. I think it's a very nice concept. We find the lav, the Isser of Gid Hanasheh. The pasuk says, "Al kein lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael sa Gid Hanasheh." He's an Isser to eat the Gid Hanasheh. The Parshas, we understand that the Isser came about right here in Parshas VaYishlach. Why is it Asser to us? It's Asser to us from this that we see in Parshas VaYishlach. In this week's Parsha, at the time of Yaakov Avinu, there's an Isser to eat Gid Hanasheh. The Gemara in Makos, the Gemara at the end of Makos says, Taryag mitzvahs nemru mesinai. 613 mitzvahs are mesinai. So the shaila is, it's 613. In Chumash Parshas, there are 3 mitzvahs. The first mitzvah of Peri V'Rivi, you open up a Sefer HaChinuch that counts through all the mitzvahs, the Taryag mitzvahs. He has 3 mitzvahs that come out of Chumash Parshas. The first one, Peri V'Rivi, the second one, Mila and Parshas Lech Lecha, and the third one over here, Gid Hanasheh. So L'cha'ira, the Gemara says, Taryag mitzvahs Nemru Mesinai, we got 613 mitzvahs. L'cha'ira, we already have a few from before our Sinai, maybe even more in Chumash Shemois. Let's focus now on Chumash Parshas. There are 3 mitzvahs that came before our Sinai. So what does the Gemara say? 613 mitzvahs Nemru Mesinai. 613. L'cha'ira, we got 610. 3 of them we got already in Chumash Parshas, and then another 610 later by Matan Torah. By a bris, the bracha asher kidishanu b'mitzvoisa v'tzivanu lachnisa b'vrisa shel Avram Avinu, which l'chayra means that the bris that we're doing now is the bris asher kidishanu b'mitzvoisa. Our mitzvah is the bris shel Avram Avinu, when we got in the times of Avram Avinu, Parshas Lech Lecha. So what does it mean that we got 613 mitzvahs misinai? So let's focus for a minute in the mitzvah of Gid Hanasheh itself, and then we'll see in general klal, the kol HaTorah kula. When exactly was the Isser of Gid Hanasheh? So I began this year by saying that the pasuk says that it happened now, Parshas VaYishlach. The truth is, it's a machlokes tanoim. In the beginning of the parak of Gid Hanasheh and Chulin, these are machlokes tanoim. If the Isser Gid Hanasheh is noyig by a behema tameya. By behema tameya. Why should it be noyig by behema tameya? If we're getting the Isser of Gid Hanasheh, and Gid Hanasheh, we could only eat a behema tahira, so why is it relevant to behema tameya? So Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll tell you why. Because the Isser came about in the times of Yaakov Avinu, right now in Parshas VaYishlach, and they were allowed to eat a behema tameya, so maybe it's relevant for a behema tameya. That's Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. And the Chachamim argue, and the Chachamim say no. It's not noig behema tameya. Why not? Because the Isser came about Bahar Sinai. The Isser came Bahar Sinai, Furush Mishnah. The Lashon HaMishnah, noig b'tahora ve'eina noig b'tameya. That's Shitas Chacham. Rabbi Yehuda says it's noig af b'tameya. The Mishnah explains, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, you know why I hold that it's noig even b'tameya? V'haloi mibnei Yaakov nesar. When did the Isser Gid Hanasheh come about? In the times of Yaakov Avinu. And they were allowed to eat a behema tameya. V'chachamim amru loi b'sinai nemar. B'sinai nemar. The Isser came b'sinai. What does it mean? Meaning to say is Mesinai Nemar, how Rashi explains, Lashon Rashi, this that the pasuk says that I just read, Al kein lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael, the Isser of Gid Hanasheh lefi Chachamim, was said by Har Sinai. The story of Har Sinai was later in Parshas Yisro. So the Mishnah says, Rashi explains, this pasuk was said later in the time of Matan Torah, and it was stuck back into our parsha in Parshas VaYishlach. So you're going to be Ma'avas Sedra, you're going to hear the Balkaya reading, Al Kein Lo Yochel B'nei Yisrael. Lefi Chachamim, this pasuk was really said later by Matan Torah, and it was stuck into the parsha over here. So what do we have? What's the clear takeaway so far? Lefi Rabbi Yehuda, the mitzvah Gid Hanasheh was given in the times of Yaakov Avinu. Lefi Chachamim, the mitzvah, the Isser of Gid Hanasheh was given in the time of Har Sinai. Klar. And Memela, the Gemara in Makis, that the Gemara says that we got 613 mitzvahs. We got the mitzvah of Gid Hanasheh, we really got it Takami Sinai, not before Sinai. To elaborate a little bit more on this, and to understand that it's not only Gid Hanasheh, I focused on a Mishnah in Chulin that speaks about Gid Hanasheh. But who said about Mila? The Gemara Makis says all 613 mitzvahs. Mila is also like that. Peri V'Rivi, all the mitzvahs are also Misinai. So the Rambam of Parshas Mishnayos on that Mishnah says a klal gadol. I'm going to read one or two lines inside. V'sim libach, says the Rambam, focus al ha'ikir hagadol ha'nichla b'mishnah. The Rambam's telling us that the Mishnah says over here, Rabbi Yehuda says that it was the times of Yaakov Avinu, and Lefi Chachamim was b'mizman Sinai. Says the Rambam, I want to tell you, this Mishnah is not just a domestic Mishnah l'gabe Gid Hanasheh. This is a klal gadol, a yesoid in kol ha'Torah kula. Says the Rambam, ha'ikir hagadol ha'nichla b'mishnah zois v'hu ma'shenemar Sinai. Nesar, because the Eibishter gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu Misinai, and not because it was earlier. The mitzvahs al yidei Moshe Rabbeinu loisha Kadosh Baruch Hu tzival lenavi lefanav. Any mitzvah that we have, all 613 mitzvahs, were only from Sinai, nothing before. All 613 mitzvahs, and the Rambam says Kamoi Kain. Ein anu malin nipnei shavram avinu mal atzmai. When we do a bris milah, it's not because we found the Parshas Lech Lecha bris milah. You know why we have the mitzvah of bris milah? Because we got the mitzvah of bris milah misinai. And Mela the Rambam says v'chein Gid Hanasheh. The Isser is not because of what happened by Yaakov Avinu. The Isser is because we got it misinai. That's what the Rambam says. Yes, he's going in Shitas Chachamim. What Chachamim say, very good point. He's going on in Shitas Chachamim. He brings Ve'ein Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, and then he says in the Chachamim, yeah, he's going in Shitas Chachamim. Very good, in Shitas Chachamim. Agav, the bracha of Lachnisa, which is Bevrisa Shel Avram Avinu. The bris, the mitzvah is because we got Sinai. Why are we saying that the mitzvah is Avram Avinu? So the miyashiv, that when we got the mitzvah Sinai, the mitzvah was to do the bris of Avram Avinu. But the chiyuv that we have, the mitzvah that say the rice of bris, is Sinai. Lefi this yisoid. And then we're going to go more into focusing in Gid Hanasheh, that's this week's parsha. But Lafidus Yesai, the Oidig Yomtiv, is Miyashav Akasha. In last week's Shiur, we spoke about Ma'ariv, many different pointers, but we began, where is the Makor for Ma'ariv? Where's the Makor? We daven Ma'ariv. What's the source? Where did it come about? So there's a Machloikis in the Gemara and Brachas. One Mandamer says, Yaakov Avinu was Masakin Ma'ariv, and another Mandamer says that Anshe Knesses Agdoilu Masakin Ma'ariv Keneged the Karbonis. The Gemara brings a brisa, a raya like each Manda Amar. If you take a look in the Gemara asks on the Manda Amar that says Yaakov Avinu was Masakin, Frek the Gemara I from the Brisa that says that it's Keneged Karbanis, and the Gemara is Mayashiv. The Gemara only asks one way. The Gemara asks, there's a Brisa Raya to each man the Amar. And each man the Amar has a Brisa like him. But if you take a look in the Gemara only asks on the man the Amar that Yaakov Avinu is Masakin. There's a Brisa that says that it's Anshe Knesset Agdoilu Masakin. Why doesn't the Gemara ask the other way as well? Both ways would be a kasha. Each man the Amar has a kasha from the other Brisa. Says the Oynig Yomtiv, L'Oyer Zeh, this you say that everything, the Rambam says that we have everything Misinai, every mitzvah. Says the Oynig Yomtiv, Ma'ariv that we daven, L'man da Amar Anshe Knesset Agdoila Tiknam, they agree that Yaakov Avinu was Masaka Ma'ariv. But why do we daven Ma'ariv? We daven Ma'ariv because of Karbanis. The same you say like what the Rambam says, that by Gid Hanasheh, true, we see it earlier, but we do it to with Noyeg Gid Hanasheh, not Noyeg. The Issa Gid Hanasheh some later. Let's go back now to the Yesod of the Rambam. This is just an aside, not this Einig Yom Tov. Let's go right back into the Yesod of the Rambam. That the Issa Gid Hanasheh, it's really a Mishnah. Shitas Chacham. The Issa Gid Hanasheh came about Bizman Sinai. We see in Parshas VaYishlach, it was stuck in later by Moshe Rabbeinu when he gave us the Torah. That's what the Mishnah, Rashi, the Rambam. Frek the Lechem Mishnah, the Rambam, at the beginning of Hilchas Malachim, the Rambam says, this Rambam we actually mentioned last week also, the Rambam goes through the history of the Marishan, Avram Avinu, Yitzchak, says the Rambam, Yaakov Avinu was Mesakin Ma'ariv, and also the Isser of Gid Hanasheh. Read the Lashon. The Yaakov Hoisef Gid Hanasheh v'Spalal Arvis. So we paskel like Chachamim. In the Mishnah and Chum we paskel like Chacham. Yochad Ram we paskel like Chacham. The Chacham said that we got the Isser Gid Hanasheh from Moshe Rabbeinu. So what does the Rambam say that Yaakov Avinu was Mesakin Gid Hanasheh? Gid Hanasheh came about Bahar Sinai, as reflected Lachem Mishnah. So in Tziyunei Maharan, that's in the back of the Shapsi Frankel Rambam, he says like this. He says that there was an Isser Bizman Yaakov Avinu. Just like by Bris Milah, like Machavrusa was Ma'orer, Bris Milah, Yaakov Avinu, Avram Avinu was Mitzuvah, the Bris Milah. Even if we have Bris Milah later and it's a Chiyuv Misinai, but Avram Avinu had Bris Milah. The same thing was Gid Hanasheh. Gid Hanasheh was already Noyeg Bizman Yaakov Avinu. However, the Isser Gid Hanasheh that we have is not that Isser, it's a new Isser Misinai. And therefore, of course, a Behemoth Tameh doesn't have Gid Hanasheh because it's a brand new Isser. To explain and to bring out the point and to elaborate on this concept, what exactly happened in the event of times. There was Gid Hanasheh then, there's Gid Hanasheh now. So the Chassam Sofer explains the following. The Chassam Sofer actually asks on the Pasuk, he wants to understand the Lashon HaTorah of the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Al Kein Lo Yoichlu B'nei Yisrael Gid Hanasheh, that's the Issa Gid Hanasheh, Al Kaf HaYorach, Ad HaYoim Hazeh. Frek the Chassam Sofer, what does it mean Ad HaYoim Hazeh? The Torah K'dosha is Nitzchias, and every mitzvah is Noyeg. So what is it? So over here, the stress that the Torah is saying Ad HaYoim Hazeh. What does it mean Ad HaYoim Hazeh? So the Chassam Sofer says the following. I'll go first to Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, then we'll go to Chachamim. In Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, the Isser came about Bizman Yaakov Avinu, and the Torah says that even though the Isser came Bizman Yaakov Avinu, it's not like Ad HaYoim Hazeh, which means it continues even after Matan Torah. And Lafi Shitas Chachamim, there was an Isser how he calls it, that was noyig. His lashon is it was noyig. It was a minig. They were noyig bezman Yaakov Avinu not to eat the Gid Hanasheh. Says the Torah by Har Sinai, this minig of Yaakov Avinu not to eat the Gid Hanasheh that was noyig till the times of Har Sinai, then came about the Isser. So again, the Rambam says, where did Gid Hanasheh come about? Like the Rambam says, Bizman Yaakov Avinu. And how the Chaim Sofer explains, it was a minig. They were noyig be'isser. And the Torah says that minig of Isser continued till Har Sinai. And then by Har Sinai came a Isser. So what do we have over here so far? Before we continue, what do we have very clear? In this week's Parsha, the Isser Gid Hanasheh, Shitas Chachamim, crystal clear that the Isser only came about in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu Bahar Sinai. However, says the Chaim Sofer, there was still an Isser, a minig of Isser, before. With this Yisod of the Chaim Sofer, you can be Miyashiv, Akasha, that Reb Tzadok HaKohen has. In Sefer Chasidim, from the Rishonim of Yehuda HaChassid, he says that you know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? Says the Sefer Chasidim, we took upon us as a kapara, how he says, so to speak, we left Yaakov Avinu alone. We left Yaakov Avinu stranded when he went himself. And that's why the story happened that the Malach was fighting with Yaakov Avinu. That's what the story of Vatiga B'Kaf Yerach Yaakov. Therefore, as a kapara, we refrain from eating Gid Hanasheh. Just read the Lashon.
You left.
What'd you say?
You left. Yaakov left. You got up and you left.
He left to go to get...
Sounds like he snuck out.
I hear. You're asking that, it's not like that he asked people to come and we didn't join from his family. It says the Sefer Chasidim from the Rishonim, Al kein lo yoichlu b'nei Yisrael's Gid Hanasheh ki amru hoyul u'parshanu we were posheya shehinachnu halayla hazakin levadoi. We left Yaakov Avinu that night by himself. Lakach ira lanu b'shvilenu. That's why this story happened. Yaakov Avinu had to fight with the Malach. If we would have been there, we would have been there to protect him. That's Sefer Chasidim. Frekt Reb Tzadok HaKohen. There's a Sefer called Sefer Zechronis. Reb Tzadok wrote a lot. This Sefer that he wrote was a Sefer that he was nifter, middle of writing this Sefer. He wrote on the mitzvahs. On Mitzvah Gimel, he brings out the mitzvah of Achilas, of the Isser of Achilas Gid Hanasheh, and he says, "V'nemar ha'azora b'Sinai." We're all familiar with this. That's the Mishnah. That's Chachamim. The Isser came about b'Sinai, and then he brings Ayin Sefer Chasidim that we just said. Shekasav. That you know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? You know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? Because of the story that happened. The story that happened that Yaakov Avinu went, and we didn't help, we didn't go with Yaakov Avinu, that's why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh. And he says, V'tzarachian. That's not why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh. We don't eat Gid Hanasheh because we got the mitzvah from Moshe Rabbeinu, from the Rebbeinu Shalom Sinai. How's it frekt Reb Tzadok? No, clear the kasha? The Sefer Chasidim says, you know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? Because a story that happened. Frekt Tzadok, that's not what happened. That's not why we have the Isser. It's because we got it, Sinai. And just to elaborate a little bit as kasha, he doesn't bring the chinuch, but it's a lashon chinuch. The chinuch says very interesting. V'hai lo yoichlu in our parsha says the chinuch. Loinemar derech sipur. It's not a story what happened that in those days, Bisman Yaakov Avinu, they decided to refrain from eating Gid Hanasheh. Says no, it's not a sipur kloi mepnei she'ira davar, a story what happened, and that's why they stopped eating. No. It says the chinuch. You know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? Because Moshe Rabbeinu told us on Har Sinai. So that's what the Tzadik's asking. That the Sefer Hasidim says, you know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? Because of a story that happened, and we need to do tshuva, which would seem like what the chinuch is saying, not like that. That's his kasha. Lefi the Chassam Sofer, that the Chassam Sofer says that he was a minig not to eat Gid Hanasheh throughout the generations from Yaakov Avinu. Like what we saw, the Rambam says, where did Gid Hanasheh come about? From Yaakov Avinu. That Isser, which was a minig, is taka like the Sefer Hasidim says. The reason for the minig, because Yaakov Avinu was left alone, Parshanu. And taka was a sipur, was a story, and a minig. However, came Matan Torah, then we got an Isser. So far there's a very clear takeaway from everything we spoke till now, that when we learned this week's Parsha, the Isser Gid Hanasheh, in the times of Yaakov Avinu, there was already an Isser. Even L'Chachamim, L'Fi Rabbi Yehuda, for sure. The Isser came then, and that's when it stayed. But even L'Fi Chachamim, there was an Isser already, but like the Chassam Sofer tells us, it was a minig. Later on, Bisman Matan Torah came an Isser. B'doima, but not exactly B'doima, is Mavur and Oinig Yomtiv, and that's saying tshuva, like the Chassam Sofer. He wants to answer the kasha we began, the Lechamishra's kasha, that the Rambam says in Parshas Mishnayos, that the Issa came in the time of Matan Torah, and the Rambam also says that it was by Yaakov Avinu. So when was the Issa? Was it in the times of Yaakov Avinu, or did it only come in the times of Matan Torah? Says the Oinig Yomtiv, B'doimet the Chassam Sofer, there was the Issa then, in the times of Yaakov Avinu, and there is an Isser in the time of Har Sinai. Says the Einig Yomtiv, the times of Yaakov Avinu, there's a pure Isser. Says the Rambam, we only have mitzvahs from Har Sinai. True. Came Har Sinai, and we got the Isser again. It's a new Isser. In the times of Yaakov Avinu's Isser, was Asser even Bebehemoth Tameya. Now, by Har Sinai, we got a brand new Isser. And in the times of Har Sinai, the Torah says, you now that he eat a behemoth tamei, so mele, it's not aser. It's the same like the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says that in the times of Yaakov Avinu, we were noyeg Isser. The Einig Yomtiv says that there was an Isser Gomer in the times of Yaakov Avinu, but yet we got a brand new Isser in the times, Bisman, in the time of Matan Torah. Why would there be an Isser? Why would there be an Isser in the times of Yaakov Avinu? A minig we understand. A minig, like we saw before the Sefer Hasidim, linhig boy Isser. But why should there be an actual Isser already in the times of Yaakov? You have to understand L'Fi Rabbi Yehuda as well. Why would there be an Isser? So the Tzlach, as well as the Rosh Yosef is the Pri Megadim, his Pirush al Hashas, says, and they explain weiter, the Lechem Mishnah, the Kasha, the reason why there's an Isser already, B'zman Yaakov Avinu, because that's when it happened. The reason for the Isser Gid Hanasheh is because what happened with the Malach. Because of what happened, Hayoset happened with Yaakov Avinu, so the Isser came about already at the time of Yaakov Avinu. Just on the notes of this point, that the Isser came about because it was in the times of Yaakov Avinu, there's a discussion if there's an Isser Gid Hanasheh by a person. There's a shaila about it. Minchas Chinuch speaks about it, and he says it depends on the Machlokes Rishonim if there's an Isser D'Oraisa to eat Basar Adam. Machlokes Rishonim, the Rajma and the Rambam. So if these are issa to eat basar adam, so then it's not relevant Gid Hanasheh because it's anyways aser. But if it would be mutter min ha-Torah, so then it would be aser. Says the Darkei Tshuva, brings a Pri Chadash, even if it would be aser to eat basar adam, lefi some of the Rishonim, there would still be an isser of Gid Hanasheh by a person. Why? Because the story happened by a person. So just to sum up, to conclude, a clear takeaway, and then I just want to end with a vort relevant Gid Hanasheh, what we're speaking about. The Isser Gid Hanasheh that we have is lahalacha, is the Isser that we got from Sinai. That's clear, that's how we paskin, that's what the Rambam says, that's lahalacha. In history, what happened before Har Sinai? So the Rambam tells us already the history that already was Bizman Yaakov. We have the Chassam Sofer that tells us that it was a minig. We have the Oinig Yom Tov that tells us that it was an Isser. But what we have the Isser of Gid Hanasheh is an Isser that came in Sinai, and it's not only Gid Hanasheh, it's all of the Taryag mitzvahs. Bris Milah, Peri V'Rivi, it's all in Sinai. Ramosha Feinstein in this week's Parsha asks the following kasha. We find that in every nest that happened throughout the generations, we have mitzvahs to commemorate what happened. We have mitzvahs aseh. Yitzias Mitzrayim, Matzah. We have mitzvahs that we do to remember the nisim that happened. Frekt Ramosha Feinstein, mitzvahs to Rabbanan, to remember now, Chanukah next week, to remember the nest of the menorah. We light the menorah. We have mitzvahs to remember. Very, very interesting to remember what happened over here. It's not a mitzvah, I say it's a law. Frekter Moshe, why is this different than anything else? Says Ramosha, and I want to just bring it out a little bit. I'm going to read the chinuch, and then I'm going to say what Ramosha's teretz is, but just to bring out the Musa, because Ramosha itself, maybe you could ask a little bit, still why is it different? You look at it inside. And this is a nice word you could say over Shabbos, a clear kash and a clear teretz. Says Ramosha, and I'm going to quote the Lashon HaChinuch, that says, what's the Yesod HaIsser of Gid Hanasheh? Why is it Aser? Misharshei HaMitzvah, the Chinuch lists out all the mitzvahs, and he explains the reason for every mitzvah. What's the reason for Gid Hanasheh? Says the Chinuch, Kedei Shetir Remes Li Yisrael. The Isser Gid Hanasheh, we're not so focused on it because it's only something that we don't have. It's not like we have the Gid Hanasheh. I mean, in the olden days you had to take it out. Use nicker to take it out. Today it's b'chlal not, because minig b'nei Ashkenaz, we don't eat the whole back of the behemoth, so we don't even get b'chlal to the Gid Hanasheh. But what's the reason to be busy taking out the Gid Hanasheh? What is it to remind us? That a rem is for Klal Yisrael, that Klal Yisrael we're going to be soivel meant a lot of tzoros throughout the Golas, throughout the generations. Miyad ha'amim u'miyad b'nei Esav, we're going to be soivel tzoros tzururas throughout the generations. It's a reminder that we're here to stay. Shlo yu betuchim shlo yoivdu. Elo la'olam yamdu, we're always going to be here, zaram u'shmam. And not only that, v'yavi lehem goyel, and we're going to come out, Mashiach's going to come. So this is what the Gid Hanasheh is to remind us, that even though we're going to go through a lot of tsaras, number one, we're here to stay. We're going to make it through. We're going to make it through, and Shiur Mashiach. That's the reason why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh, to remember. Very nice. Where does that come into what? Because Yaakov Avinu was fighting with Sarai Shel Esav, which wasn't stam a fight, just a little fight over there. This was a fight of the Nitzchis. The Sarai Shel Esav wanted to put away Yaakov Avinu. So this is a for Doiris. So the Chinuch says, you know why we don't eat Gid Hanasheh? To remember that for the generations to come, there's going to be these tsaras, tzururas, and we're going to survive it, and we're going to keep on going, and Mashiach's going to take us out. Zok to Ramosha Feinstein. You know why Gid Hanasheh, to remember this, is b'sheva al tasa, refraining from eating, as opposed to all other nisim that's become Vasei. Every Nes, we were saved, is a Nes and we moved on. This is not a Nes and we moved on. This is a constant battle, Dr. Moshe, we must follow every single day. We don't want any battle. It's true when a person has Yisurim, it's Bechaper, but we would rather not have Yisurim. We would rather not have an Nisayon. So it's true we have to remember this lesson, but it's not that we want these tsaris throughout the generations. It's something that even though we have the tsaris, it's a lesson to tell us that we're going to last through the tsaris. So Meila Dr. Moshe, that's why eating Gid Hanasheh is different than all the other nisim that we remember. The Nes of when we went out of Mitzrayim, we had matzah. This that we want to remember is something we would prefer not to have to remember this. In other words, we prefer to be out of the Galus, out of the tsaris, be in Yemoisa Mashiach, and not need it. So therefore, it's true we need a reminder, but the reminder is rather b'sheva al tasa as opposed to b'kum v'asei. We should be zoicha to what the chinuch says, that this lesson, the mitzvah of this week's parsha, even though it was taka later on bizman Har Sinai, but the lesson is the lesson, like the chinuch says, that even though we're begolas and these tsaris, we're going to make it through the tsaris, and also we're going to Beis Hashem be zoicha to the Gula Shleiba. Have a wonderful Shabbos.